Hey there everybody, Scotia here, and we are now just a couple days over the 2-year anniversary of Street Fighter 6. And if you remember last year, for the 1-year anniversary, I did a video where I basically just looked back at the past year of Street Fighter 6, all the content we got, all the updates, all the characters, and the stuff that came with them, and the stuff in between that we got. So if you watch that video, pretty much it's going to be the same thing here, because this is now, 2 years looking back. So yeah, I don't want to spend too long on this intro. But yeah, if you watched the last video, you know what's going to be going on here. If you didn't, then yeah, I'm just going to be going through the last year of Street Fighter 6. Not all of it, like I'm not going to be talking about, gameplay and balance and characters and tiers and stuff like that. If you know me by now, that's not what I do on this channel. If you want, other stuff like that, then there's plenty of other channels out there that will do a far better job at it than me. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it, and let's start with the first character of year 2, which was Bison. So, 35 days or 1 month and 4 days after the release of Akuma, who was the last character of Season 1 and the end of Season 1, we got Bison on June 26th, 2024. Now, first off, I just want to say this was like an insanely quick turnaround, like quicker turnaround than we had had for any other character, prior to this. And, I'd said in the last video when I covered Year 1, it was a bit odd to me that Rashid released so soon after Street Fighter 6 came out. It was about just over a month, I think, if my memory is correct. It was about July. And I'd said while that was cool and it was nice to get a character that soon, I think considering it was only just over a month since the game come out, people were still kind of figuring out the characters, figuring out the gameplay, all the systems. And then on the other side of that, you had Arky, who released, just a couple of months later, but then there was such a massive gap between Arky and Ed, who came out in, I think, February the following year. It was just a bit odd to me, because I remember thinking, like, why didn't you just kind of push Rashid, to, like, August, then push Arky to, like, I don't know, to October, or even November? Like, it would have made the gaps between those characters feel a little less bad, I think. And this is the same here. If anything, it's a little bit kind of worse, because Bison came out at the end of June, and then we'll get to Terry later, but Terry was still September, Mai was still February. Granted, she was early February, and then Elena was delayed a little bit to the start of June. So it was just a bit weird to me. Like, I think they did it for like a big hype, the big announcement of year 2 at Summer Games Fest that year. And then it was kind of like, hey, Bison is coming out like really soon. I think the next day after the year 2 reveal was his gameplay reveal, and that was a huge moment. Like, there was a lot of buzz around that, so I think in that sense it was smart. But like, short term it was smart, long term it was even more of a weight than what we had the previous year. So it was cool, but I think a bit short-sighted. Like, it was a good little burst of hype at that moment, but then once kind of Bison came out and everyone's like, cool, we're playing Bison, and we're kind of used to Bison now. And obviously Bison was really strong when he came out gameplay wise, so it was like, cool, we just got Bison now. And then it was like an even longer wait for Terry. So I think a bit short-sighted in the grand scheme of things. Cool for the time, but now looking back on it, yeah, and it's one of those things where they could very well do that again for year 3. I mean, the current assumption from a lot of people is that year 3 could very well get announced at Summer Games Fest again this year, which would be cool. But, I don't know. It's one of those things where I think the kind of schedule for when they release these characters, obviously the gaps are large. We know that by now. I mean, I'll get to that, towards the end, my kind of final thoughts on everything. But I think stuff like this is like, you can make them feel not as large by kind of just being a bit smarter about it. Like, if you just move stuff around a bit, like 35 days after Akuma, and Akuma was like a big release. Like, I think the Steam numbers for Street Fighter 6 were like the biggest they'd ever been when Akuma came out. So, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, it just felt very, like I said, just very short-sighted. I think they could have played it out better. I think they could have planned it a bit smarter so that, long term it was a bit more worth it, but yeah. So let's talk about Bison as a character and his inclusion in the game, because, yeah, I'm going to say some things here because, if you watched my year 2 reveal and my thoughts after that, yeah, I'm not happy that Bison got in the game. Obviously, I'm not stupid enough to think Bison was never coming back, or that he wouldn't come back in Street Fighter 6 at some point. It was incredibly obvious that he would, even, if you ignored, like, all the direct hints that were there, that came with the World Tour update, that came with Akuma, like, all the stuff that was directly pointing, like, Bison is coming back, if not has already came back. Like, if you ignored all that and just looked at the way Capcom, and especially the director and the producer, Nakayama and Matsumoto, Like, they're huge Bison fanboys. It was incredibly obvious that he was going to come back at some point. And I think, all things considered, like, I think they did a pretty good job with him. Like, I think this is a very interesting take on Bison. And this is, just get rid of all the story stuff for now. Get rid of all the kind of issues that come with Bison coming back at this point in the story and how they may have handled it. We'll get to that. Just purely as he's presented in the game, in terms of gameplay, in his moves, his animations, his design, his intros, his outros, stuff like that. How he's presented in the game is really cool, and like I said, it's a very interesting take on Bison. And in all honesty, it's probably not that far from what I would have done if somebody said to me, right, you have to bring back Bison in a World Post 3. My first thing is remove Shadaloo from him. We can make a new Shadaloo, whatever, put whoever you want in it. I think the main thing with Bison for now, what I would do, is get rid of Shadaloo, get rid of all that stuff, get rid of the megalomaniac dictator stuff, just completely get rid of it. We've done it to death. It doesn't need to happen again. And for the most part, at least the setup of the character, that's kind of what they did. This is, like, it's Bison, but it's not Bison. He doesn't have the memories of the previous Bison. He doesn't have, that initial, like, megalomaniac, I have to take over the world desire. He doesn't have that from the start. And I really enjoyed his arcade mode, which did set up the character. That was really great, and I remember playing it because I streamed the whole thing. His arcade and his world tour. I streamed the whole thing, and I enjoyed it. Like, I really liked his arcade mode, and I think it was a good setup for the character. And I just feel like he really did a good job on setting him off on the right foot in terms of going, you know what, this isn't the dictator Bison. This is now the wandering fighter Bison. I think it's very interesting because I really like it when fighting games, have a boss, they have a main villain, and they have whatever their machinations are. They want to rule the world, they want to kill somebody, they want to get revenge on one, or whatever the plot decides their machinations and their, like, plots and their motivations are. And then they're the boss of the game. And then they get defeated, and that's it. Their plans have been foiled, and they move on. Now, with some games, they keep these characters coming back regardless. Obviously Street Fighter is a big one with Bison. But other games, they have it where that character, either they go away for a bit or they come back the next game, but they're not the main villain anymore, and they kind of just slip right into the normal roster. And obviously, they're still a villain. They're still strong. But they've kind of been downscaled a bit to, fit in with the rest of the roster. And it's, not a lot of games do this. I think off the top of my head, the best example I can kind of feel is probably Tekken, because you have, Heihachi, Kazuya, Jin, like, they're all bosses in, certain games. And then at some point, whether it's the next game or the game after that or a later game, they come back and they're a normal member of the roster. Still a villain, still incredibly strong, but they blend in with everybody else. And, I really love it when games do that. And, like, I think that's the sweet spot for a lot of fighting game villains, or it should be rather, where, they're the main villain for a game or two, they're clearly, a big threat, but then they get defeated, their story wraps up, they move down to a regular playable character, and then a new villain comes in, and then, things keep moving forward. And obviously, like I said, not a lot of games do this, but I think when it works and when it happens, man, it's so good. And this is honestly, like, a really good setup to have Bison in this, what I've just been talking about. Having him being a main villain for so long, and then, he loses spectacularly in Street Fighter 5, like, he's dead. Like, that was, absolutely marketed and portrayed as, like, this is the end of Bison, this is why he isn't in Street Fighter 3. And then, we bring him back, because of course we have to bring him back. But, he's scaled down. He's still powerful, still insanely strong. But, he's not just, I want to rule the world, I want to build Shadaloo and, do all this stuff. He's not that anymore. And I think just making him that kind of wandering fighter, I think it's honestly, like, a good parallel with Ryu as well. Because Ryu, at this point in the timeline, he's moved on. He's still, the big wandering fighter, but his mentality of stuff is advanced to a stage where, he's a lot different to how he was earlier in the series. And, you can kind of say that, Ryu is the wandering fighter of, kind of, not peace, but just, just of good. Like, I'll just keep it basic, like, Ryu is the wandering fighter of good. And I think having that parallel of Bison being the wandering fighter of evil, I don't know, I really like that. And that's kind of what I would do. Just remove Shadaloo, get rid of that shit. Like I said, we've done it a million times already. We don't need to do it again. And then, just have him kind of remove the memories, remove that thing. Because then you can even have interesting interactions, because you can have a moment where, like, Chun-Li or Cammy or Guile, they run into this new Bison, and they're like, oh shit, Bison, you're back, what the hell, I'm going to destroy you. And Bison's like, I just want power, like, I don't want to take over the world, like, I don't remember anything I did, I'm not friendly, like, I'm still going to, beat you and even kill you if I can. And it's those characters, Guile, Cammy, etc., being like, oh, you know, this isn't the Bison that we knew. Obviously, I'm not just going to let him go. Like, I'll do, you know, but like kind of coming to terms with like, hey, this isn't the person that, you know, wronged me, that did these things to me, that did things to my loved ones. I don't know. I think that's so fascinating. And I think that's such a much more interesting way of doing things than how they end up doing, because you get to World Tour, and man, World Tour, like, I was so kind of like, oh, you know, like after playing the arcade, I was like, oh man, like I'm actually like really doing it like kind of how I would do it. And that's really interesting and cool. And then you get to World Tour, and you know, it's been a while since I've like played it and watched it, so my memory might be fuzzy, but like you end up finding him, and then you do all the stuff, and you find the abandoned lab, and Bison does the thing with the computer, and like there's the AI memory or whatever of, you know, the original Bison, the Street Fighter 5, and, you know, prior Bison. And yeah, I think the new Bison does something where like he kind of like destroys or maybe absorbs. Somebody can correct me on this, I'm not 100% sure, but something happens, and like the new Bison basically just either takes over or just gets rid of in some way, shape or form, you know, the old memory of the old Bison, and then it's like, you know, I don't need that anymore. And then he kind of just takes over the lab, and then basically for the rest of, you know, his World Tour stuff, you as the player character, you kind of just go around, just start rebuilding Shadloo. And like that was the point where I was playing, I'm like, oh, like for fuck's sake, like why is like almost straight away we're back to just bringing back Shadloo. Bison's back, go and find Vega, go and fight Balrog, you just get them right back in, let's just redo Shadloo again, let's just build it back up, because God forbid we do something new with these characters. And I don't feel so much bad for Balrog, because he still has the stuff with Ed, and I think that could be a good conflict of interest with Balrog, where he's like, do I just blindly side with Bison again because he's going to pay me, or do I, you know, side with my old protege, my old ward, Ed, the kid that I kind of helped raise in a way. Vega, though, I feel so bad for Vega, because I really feel like he should have came back in this game before Bison, because if any character needed like a big kind of like story and character revamp, it's him. Because I feel like he's just been such a kind of almost like 2D character for so long, just very flat. Like, he's always just had the narcissist stuff. He's just such a, I don't want to say boring, because I don't think he's boring, but there's just not a lot to Vega. And I feel like, you know, you really could make Vega a much more interesting character. I think for me, the way I would do, you know, something with Vega is I would 100% have brought him back before Bison, because he really needed to come back and just have, you know, some time where he's not just glued to Bison and Shadloo's hip. And I think you really could have shown, like, you know, Balrog went off and he just made money, but what does Vega do? And, you know, from what we see in this game and what we see, you know, with bits in Street Fighter 4, he just does nothing really. He just sits there, kind of hosts parties every now and then, and just waits for the call, like, hey, we're doing Shadloo again. And he's like, okay, cool, I can go back. And I think you can really explore that, and I think you can really go like, hey, Vega at first seems like he's just, you know, working for Shadloo because it's just a job and all that. But I think you can really, like, attach a really deep, like, infatuation or even, like, obsession, you know, with Vega and Shadloo, where it's like, Vega needs Bison, he needs Shadloo. Like, he's so aimless without them. And I think you really could have explored that when it's like, right, what does Vega do when, you know, when Bison is gone and there's no sign that he's coming back? Like, the whole organization of Shadloo has just been completely shut down almost. What does Vega do? And I think you really could have just, like, shown how aimless he is and how much he actually, you know, in a weird way, in his own way, how much he actually cared for Bison, how much he actually cared for Shadloo, how much it meant to him, and he didn't realise that until it was gone entirely. I think you really could have explored that, and, you know, maybe there's still a chance it is explored, because, you know, I think Vega's, like, pretty likely to be in this game. Balrog I'm a bit 50-50 on, but I definitely think Vega's going to come back at some point. But, like, if he comes back, is it just going to be, you know, hey, I'm back with Shadloo now? Like, you know, so lame to me, so boring. And it's such a shame. I feel so bad for Vega. I really feel like he needs, like, a big, you know, just deep dive. And I think this is the game to do it. But, like, I kind of feel like it's already wasted in a way, because, you know, Bison's back already and Shadloo's back already. So it's just like, you know, there's no opportunity for him to really do anything new, because he's already pretty much just going to... You know, it's weird, because there's this kid, I remember there's a kid that's, you know, supposedly, you know, Vega's protege, like Ed was to Balrog, which I kind of feel like is a bit... not lazy, but I feel like it's a bit kind of like a bit lame, because it's just like, I don't know, like Balrog got such a big boost with Ed in Street Fighter 5. Like, I never really cared much for Balrog in you know, in any Street Fighter game. But, you know, how much we saw of his relationship with Ed and, you know, just their dynamic between each other, like, really, really boosted Balrog in my eyes as a character. And I really feel like, you know, I think Vega needs that, definitely, but it just kind of, I don't know, it just feels so cheap to me to just kind of be like, hey, Vega's got a protege as well. And it's like, you know, you just kind of, I don't know, to me it feels like they're trying to do the same thing with Vega that they did with Balrog, where it's like, hey, just give you a kid apprentice and just hope that just naturally makes you a much more interesting character. And it's like, it very well could, but just on the surface, just trying to do exactly what you did with Balrog in the past is like, I don't know, just from the start, I don't really feel like I'm sold on it, you know? But yeah, no, going back to Bison, yeah, I was very, very disappointed with his World Tour stuff. I felt like it was just, honestly, like, creatively bankrupt in a way, because it's like, it just feels like Capcom just are so, they're just so clueless, you know? It feels like they have no idea what to do when Bison and Shadaloo isn't there for them to fall back on. It's like, they just have no idea. It's like, well, like, what do we do plot-wise? Like, you know, they had all this stuff with JP and that they were building up, and then it's just like, oh shit, wait, but if nobody likes JP, then what do we do? It's like, quick, like, hit the Bison button, hit the Shadaloo button. And it just feels so lazy to me. It feels honestly like cowardly in a way. Like, and I know that's harsh, but it's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's like, they just are so, they just don't have any idea what to do with this franchise without having Bison and Shadaloo as like a safety net, where it's like, well, if we try something new and it doesn't work, at least we can fall back on Bison and Shadaloo. And I'm like, man, that's just so safe, so boring. And yeah, no, like, it was so disappointing, because like, I really liked Bison's arcade mode. I thought it was such a good setup for like this new version of this character, like a new era for the series of like, hey, we can have Bison back. It's fine to have Bison back. Just don't make him rebuild Shadaloo. And they just immediately, he just starts building Shadaloo again. I don't know, I had some people say, and some people will probably say here, like, well, he's not, you know, it's not the same. It's like, I can only judge it based on how it is now in the game, when I look at it now. And as it seems now, it very much looks like he's just starting to build Shadaloo again. You know, even Bison's battle pass that came out, I think after he came out, it's called Return of Shadaloo or something like that. The whole thing, you know, it's insanely obvious to me. I don't know how other people don't see it. They're clearly just trying to build Shadaloo back and to get us back to the status quo of the previous games of like 4 and 5 and Alpha and whatever. It's just so obvious to me, and it's such a shame, because like they really actually genuinely had something really cool with this character, and it just feels like they just piss it away just to get us back to where we were, you know, in the last game and the game before that. It's such a shame. It just does my head in, because it's like, we're so close, we're on the cusp of actually having like a really interesting setting that was like doing something new. Like the game's actually the series and the game, I mean, were doing something new. We were in a completely new world. We were post Street Fighter 3 for the first time. You know, the furthest we'd ever gone in the series in like 25 years, and we've just completely like ruined it and just tossed it aside to go back to what we always do. And it's just like, oh my god, it's just frustrating. And I'd very much made my stance clear when Bison got revealed. Like, I'm not happy with him being in the game. I knew he was going to be in the game eventually, like I said way earlier. I knew he was going to be in the game eventually. It was incredibly obvious he was going to be. You know, even if you ignored all the clues and hints that were going on. And yeah, even if I just give them the benefit of the doubt and go, you know what, the stuff with Shadaloo, we'll see how it goes. It could be ending up completely different to how I'm assuming it goes. It's something completely new and fresh and exciting. You know, maybe we'll find out later in the game's life, like year 3 or 4 or 5. You know, maybe we'll find out in the next game entirely. We'll find out, I guess. You know, I'm still not keen on the idea, like I said, as it is now. I don't like the look of it. But you know what? I can go, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll see how the end goal is when we get to it. Pushing all that aside, my main issue with Bison's inclusion in this game is that it's just far too early. They completely rushed to get him in the game because he's their favourite, because they like him, because they like Street Fighter 2, they like all this stuff, they want to get back to the status quo, whatever the reason is, and it's probably all of the above in all honesty. But you know, with all those reasons, at the end of the day, they could have just done this so much better, and I think, you know, ultimately, I'm fine with Bison being in the game if you do something interesting with him, which they are, but they also aren't. But you know, if we just ignore the World Tour stuff and just, like, as a character, like I said earlier, I think he's really cool. And I like this version of him, and I think it's a good route to go with him for now. But my main issue, it's just way too early. Why is he the first character of year 2? Why is he in the game before a single fucking Street Fighter 3 character? In this game, set post Street Fighter 3, Bison and Shadaloo are back before any Street Fighter 3 character, before any Street Fighter 3 storyline. It's a joke. It's absolutely ridiculous. But it's entirely expected. I expect nothing less from Capcom. But, you know, when I sit here at my desk recording this video, I'm just a guy from the UK who just makes videos on things he likes and things he doesn't like. But even then, I feel like with enough time and kind of focus on it, I genuinely could plan out a better build-up to Bison coming back in this game than what Capcom actually did with him in this game. Because you could have done You could have made this such a big event like Bison's return, because this was the big return. This was always the one where it's like, whenever Bison comes back, whenever they make a game post 3 and Bison comes back, this is the big one, because you're explaining how he was gone for the entirety of Street Fighter 3. And they didn't really explain it. It's just kind of like he just suddenly decided, okay, now I'm going to come back in this body, whatever. You could have made this such a big event. You could have built up to it so much better. Because all the clues and stuff that came in the World Tour update that came with Akuma were really cool and very interesting, and like people were dissecting it. Even I like thought at one point like they were having clues to who was going to be in the next season, because it was like France was mentioned, so it's like, is Remy coming back? Is Abel coming back? They did all this stuff. It was really cool. And then they just kind of like immediately Bison's back. So it's like, okay, cool. That was just, it was setting up Bison. But just imagine if they just took their time with it. If they didn't just rush to get Bison in the game because they wanted their favourite Street Fighter 2 villain in the game. Imagine if they'd gone, right, okay, each season we add new clues for Bison. We add more bits of info and cryptic stuff to kind of tease his return. If in year 2 we got another bit of thing where you meet somebody who's like, oh yeah, I saw a guy wearing a cloak and riding a horse, and he was so scary I ran away. And then that's it. And you're like, oh, who was that? Was it Bison? Was it somebody else? Is it a new character? Is it somebody else, who's now wearing a cloak? Is it Sagat? And then in year 3, you could have had another thing. You could have met Vega, and Vega could have dropped some kind of teasers here and there. Like, oh, don't worry about Shadaloo. Like, Shadaloo's not finished. Like, don't worry about Bison, kind of teasing that. And then year 4, you could have, like, seen an actual photo of Bison. Like, this is Bison's new design. Like, this is what he's going to look like when he gets added. Or you could even gone even the extra mile and have Bison actually show up, and you have, like, an actual, like, super hard boss fight in World Tour against Bison. Like, you get a preview of what he's going to be like, and then year 5, like, he's the first character of year 5, and you make this big event, like, you go all out, you just change, like, everything about the game, like, you just build, like, you go marketing wise, you change the battle hub to just Shadaloo themed, you do all this stuff, giant attack, whatever. You could have done all this, and man, I just think, like, why didn't they take their time? They could have just taken the time. And I get it. Street Fighter 2 fans are the most impatient people on earth. I'm sorry. But just from my experience, they are the most impatient, demanding people I've ever met in fighting games. Like, just in terms of fighting game fans. Like, they want their characters day one, and if they don't get it, it's bullshit, it's ridiculous, this game's dead, who cares? Why is this character back over this character? Why are we getting Elena over Blanc? They will do all that shit. I'm sorry, they are the most annoying, worst demanding people out there. But honestly, they can wait. I get it. But at the same time, like, so many other characters and so many other fans and players of those characters have been waiting a lot longer than you guys have been waiting for Bison. Like, Makoto fans have been waiting a long time. Dudley, even further. Sean, I'm a Sean main in Third Strike. 25 years, almost 26. Oh no, it is 26 now. 26 years since he was last in a Street Fighter game. I'm still waiting, but you guys couldn't wait 4 years for Bison. But yeah, no, I know people would have been unhappy, like, oh, where's Bison, blah, blah, blah. Just play somebody else. Like, I have to play somebody else every Street Fighter game. Every time a Street Fighter game comes out, I have to play somebody else, because the characters I like don't come back straight away. You guys could have lived for a game without Bison, and I think it would have done more for hype to build it up. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just a guy sat here at a desk recording this. And yeah, I don't know, I just feel like they just wasted it, because Bison's back now. Bison coming back should have been a big deal. And it was for like a bit, and then he came back. But I think more people were kind of just like, more exasperated, just kind of like, oh, he's back already? Like, you couldn't keep him away for long. It also didn't help that Tekken brought back Heihachi, like, pretty much around about the same time. So, you have this double whammy of like, hey, fighting game stories just don't matter, because if the devs like a character enough, they'll just bullshit them back regardless of if it makes sense or not, or if it's good for the story or not. And yeah, I just think if they had waited, if they had just took their time and just showed, hey, we're not just going to immediately rush back to what we like because it's the status quo and we're too afraid to do anything else. Who knows? Maybe my idea that I just said would have been awful and would have done even worse and been received worse than Bison coming back straight away. Who knows? We'll never know, because that's it now. Bison's back, and that's it. You've just kind of brushed through his big return post Street Fighter 3 like it was nothing. Didn't even really explain, from what I remember at least, didn't really explain why he was gone, how he stayed gone for so long, why did he come back now? That was kind of brushed over from what I remember. And yeah, you've just kind of wasted it now. And now when Bison dies again, because he probably will die again, nobody's going to care, because why should we care? Because we just know he's going to come back. And obviously, yeah, this has happened in previous games, like he died in Alpha to come back in 2. But like, this was the big one. Like I said, like, this was the big one. This was the one that was like, he was gone for an entire game in Street Fighter 3 because of what happened in 5. And it's just absolutely brushed past it like it was nothing. And now future deaths and future resurrections are just going to be met with, okay, who cares? So yeah, I think Bison, I think his return was wasted. I genuinely think it was wasted. I think they did a good job with the character. Up until World Tour. I think World Tour kind of ruined it again, like I said earlier. But, you know, the arcade setup and all that, I think was great. And I think if they just took their time, if they just had some goddamn patience and just didn't want to rush back to get him in the game as soon as possible, I think if they didn't do that and took their time and they built it up properly, I think Bison's return in this game could have been one of the biggest things, like, in fighting games ever. Like, genuinely, like, they could have made this such a massive event. Like, they could have done so many different things with it. They could have built it up in such a way and marketed it and just like used other mediums to promote it. It could have done, you know, they could have done all sorts to really go like, hey, Bison's coming back, like this is the big return of Bison. And they just pissed it away. And I think it's such a shame. I mean, ultimately, I don't care because I don't really like Bison, in all honesty. Just, you know, it's not my favourite character at all. I don't know, I just think even then, even not liking the character and what he represents and how Capcom treat him and, you know, how it reflects on how they treat Street Fighter 2 and the rest of the series, you know, even with all that in mind, they could have done this so much better. I wanted them to do this so much better, because if you're going to bring this guy back, at least make it mean something, at least make it a big deal, and they just didn't, you know. Like I said earlier in the video, you know, in the short term, they got a really big moment and a really big buzz, and then just long term, it just really went away. And, you know, even now sitting here, I'm like, just doesn't really feel like it matters, you know. I think that's such a shame. They could have done this so much better. So short-sighted. Just everything about this character just feels so short-sighted in this game. Like, they just wanted that quick buzz, like, hey, Bison's back, you know, we got our favourite in the game, look at this, and then they were just kind of, okay, here's the SNK characters, let's all move on. And I'm like, you could have built towards this so much better. Like, even if you'd done Bison's the last character in the game, and like, you could have built it up so, literally, this entire game's life could have been the return of Bison, and you could have seen, like, the characters, their reactions to it. Like, you could have spoken to Chun-Li in like a new World Tour mission where she's like, I'm hearing rumors Bison's back, and like I'm honestly like scared, but like, you know, we need to get to the bottom of this. So many different things you could have done. Again, I'm just a guy sitting there waffling into a microphone. I genuinely feel like if you give me enough time to actually sit down and plan this through, I genuinely could plan the return of Bison better than Capcom did in this game, and that's just sad. It's just sad. So, 90 days or 2 months and 29 days after the release of M. Bison, we got Terry Bogard in Street Fighter 6 on September 24th, 2024. And yeah, this was a pretty big deal because this was the first like proper guest character that Street Fighter had pretty much ever had. And I will say, in terms of like who they could have chosen to be that first guest character, I think Terry was about as perfect as an option as you could pick, really. I mean, Terry and, you know, Fatal Fury as a series are almost just spiritual sister series in a way, because if my memory's correct, the development team of the original Street Fighter 1, was pretty much the team that would eventually go on to make the first Fatal Fury game, and, you know, so on and so forth. So, you know, the two series and, you know, Terry in particular have always felt, you know, very close. So, you know, I think this was a good choice. I was really, you know, happy with Terry being in the game. I thought it was a really fun choice. You know, did we need a guest character so soon, you know, only in the second year of the game when so many other characters are still missing? Probably not, but I think that's a topic for the next section, or which I'll save for the next section, sorry. So I'm happy that he's in the game, and I think he's a good choice, but, you know, maybe we really didn't need him, you know, this soon in the game. But after Elena, he was probably the character I was the most excited for, the most interested in playing, and yeah, he turned out pretty well. He's pretty much been my kind of like quasi-main, I guess, for most of the last year. It was Ed in the previous year was the character I played the most, but in this season, in this year, it was Terry. Not that he was like a proper main, it's just a character that like the few times I would come on and like play this game, I would probably play as Terry, because he was just the most fun to play, and at the time, he was just the most new and refreshing and stuff like that. But in terms of the content that came with Terry, there's honestly not a lot I can even really say, because, you know, most of it was just fan service, and that's not a bad thing. I think, you know, the way that both Terry and Mai were handled in this game was about as good as you can do. Like, it was clearly a love letter to SNK, to those characters, to Fatal Fury, and that's great, and I really like that. But in terms of just actual substance and like my thoughts on this, like, you know, compared to Bison and with Elena, there's just not much I can really say. Like, it was fun, I enjoyed it, but it was more like a theme park, and that's all you can kind of really say. I don't know if that anecdote really makes sense or not, but yeah, there's just not a lot I can really say. Like, I'm not going to go in depth on his World Tour stuff like I just did with Bison, or even his arcade stuff. I mean, his arcade stuff was, again, it was about what I would have expected. I mean, it was nice that they actually tied in, you know, why he was in Metro City and all that, even though the stuff that came with Terry and Mai, the story stuff, I mean, sorry, like, even though that stuff, like, wasn't, like, you know, canon, like, it clearly didn't matter to the story, like, there was no actual, like, impact on the narrative of Street Fighter 6 as a whole with these two. It was nice of them to kind of implement them in a kind of, like, here's what Mai and Terry would be doing if they were in Street Fighter 6 hypothetically, which they are, but like, it's just a what if, like, it doesn't matter, there's no actual, like, canon things going on here. But it was nice of them to, like, tie in, like, why there was, like, a Pow Pow Cafe 6 and stuff like that. It was nice of them to have, you know, Terry and Ken meet and kind of, like, Terry see Ken at his lowest point in this game and kind of give him, you know, a sort of, like, pep talk, and then even kind of, like, build a bit or kind of tease towards what actually wasn't announced at the time, I don't think, was Ken's eventual inclusion in Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. Like, that was really cool and I really liked that. Again, not much substance. I'm not going to go and waffle for like half an hour like I did with Bison about this implication and what it means for the rest of the series and the story. It doesn't really matter, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. And it's the same with the World Tour stuff, because again, that was just like a theme park ride. It was just like, hey, go through Metro City and see all these different like cosplayers like this. Here's this NPC dressed as Franco Bash, here's this NPC dressed as Sokaku Mochizuki, stuff like that. It was really fun, but again, not a lot I can really say about it. And again, that's not a bad thing, it's just for this video. Yeah, I'm kind of just repeating myself, but it was just fun, but that's all there really was to it. It was fun, it was a good time, it was nice to see, you know, how much of a love letter it all was from Capcom. You could even make the joke, and I know somebody at the time who I talked to online even made the joke that, you know what, you could pretty much say that, like, you know, Capcom kind of are more of a fan of, you know, SNK and Fatal Fury titles than they are like some of their own games in the series, you know. And you know, I would fully believe that, because there was so much just love and attention, and it was the little details really made it. And I'll talk a little bit more about it when I talk about Mai, but just seeing like certain characters pop up, like, oh, here's this character, it was really cool. And even the battle passes that they did for Mai and Terry were just so crammed full of like really cool nods. But yeah, just stuff like that. Like, it was just fan service, but in such a fun way. And you know, I think they really nailed it. And I can't really like think of how else Capcom could have done it better, or like, oh, maybe if they'd done this, you know. Like, obviously with Bison, I went on and on about like, I would have done it like this, I would have changed this, I wouldn't have done this. With Terry and Mai, there was really no need for that, because, you know, everything that I expected them to do, they did, and then they also went like above and beyond in terms of what I expected them to do, like all the little nods, all the stuff like that. Yeah, they really did a good job. And I think, you know, in terms of what this collaboration should have been and what it could have been, yeah, I think they absolutely smashed it. I think the only other thing I can really think of, you know, to talk about Terry that came with the Terry update is the new thing that they did with World Tour, where everything to do with Terry and Mai was separated into its own like separate World Tour category. I think it was called One Fateful Day or something like that. And I think that was a really great way of separating, you know, here's the canon Street Fighter 6 storyline with all the Street Fighter characters, and then you have the side thing where it's just, you know, purely SNK stuff, purely Terry and Mai. If you want Terry and Mai stuff, you go there and you do that. And I think that was great. And obviously, I mean, you could have done Terry and Mai in the actual, like, in the main World Tour section of Street Fighter 6. But, you know, I think this was a better way of doing it. I think just separating it, I think it was a clear line in the sand. Like, in this part, the World Tour stuff, this is the canon stuff. This stuff that's separate with Terry and Mai, this is non-canon. I think that was a great way of doing it. In general, though, I think this is a very good way in the future of expanding on World Tour story, because the one thing that's kind of like been in the back of my mind, and I think other people I think I've talked to or heard have also kind of theorized this, is like, at some point World Tour as it is going to get filled up, and like obviously they can add new stages and new zones that you can meet them in, but in terms of like Metro City and Neishal, like it's going to get to the point where like there's just going to be too many characters, like you know, masters are going to be too close to each other and stuff like that. And also the way the story is, it's like it's all tied into the, you know, the main story of World Tour that's tied to Bosch and all that. It kind of gets to a point where it's like, say hypothetically they wanted to add Bosch as a future master, how would that really work when, you know, the story revolves around, you know, the things that happen with Bosch? And then if he was to come back, obviously he would be different given how the story goes. How would that work? And I think this is a really great way for people who are like jumping into Street Fighter 6 for the first time at any point, whether it's now, in the future, year 5, year 6, when Street Fighter 7 is coming out, whatever. I think those people who jump in, they can just go straight into like the main part of World Tour that we have now. But then the people who've been following the game, who have gone through World Tour's main story, have completed all the missions, mastered all the masters and stuff like that, at a certain point when Capcom feel like, okay, okay, we want to expand on the story, we want to continue the plot of World Tour and Street Fighter 6, they can go, okay, instead of just kind of like wiping everything or kind of cramming everything into this one zone, here's a new tab on the World Tour screen where, you know, we're now going to start moving the story forward. And it's like, if you want to talk to the masters of like the main game, then, you know, you can go into the main game section of World Tour. But if you want the new story and all the new masters, then you can go into there, and you can even like change some of the characters around. So for example, Ken is in the construction yard in the main game of World Tour, but if you want to move the plot along with Ken and have him involved in the story, in the new section of World Tour, you can move Ken to somewhere else. You can have Ken in Neyshal, stuff like that. I think that'd be really cool, and I think this is a really kind of good way of doing it. And I hope this is a tease, like though this whole like One Fateful Day thing, I hope it's kind of a tease in a way of like, this is how we're going to be expanding World Tour's story like in the future, because in all honesty, if they don't use this to expand the story, they're fools. I know that's harsh, but like this is such a perfect way of doing it. And like my main thing of like, because I feel like the longest time, like pretty much the last year plus, of being like, they're not going to expand on the story because like just the way World Tour works, there's no way to expand on it because it's just going to get too crammed and like overlap. But this fixes that entirely. Like you can have a new section similar to One Fateful Day that just moves the story forward, and then if you want to move the story forward like a third time, you can have a third and you can do all this stuff. And if they don't utilize that, then they're just idiots, to be honest. Like again, brutal, harsh, I know, but like they've already made such a perfect way of expanding the story, and if they don't do it, then I just have no hope for Capcom, in all honesty, in that regard. I mean, so 134 days or 4 months and 12 days after Terry, we got Mai Shiranui in Street Fighter 6 on February 5th, 2025. So yeah, if you thought I didn't have much to say about Terry, I've got even less to say about Mai, in all honesty. Pretty much everything I just said about Terry and, you know, the stuff that came with him can pretty much be applied to Mai as well. Her arcade mode was pretty bog standard. I will say the one thing I was surprised about that, I don't know why she fought Juri at the end and not Chun-Li, given Chun-Li is going to be in City of the Wolves. Thought that was kind of a missed thing there. I think it would have been good to kind of have that confrontation to then tease towards them two, you know, eventually having their clash in City of the Wolves. And I even thought the confrontation between Mai and Juri was just dumb anyway, because if my memory's correct, Juri calls Mai like a butterface or something. It's just like, okay, cool. Very, very weird. I didn't really care for her arcade mode in general. I thought it was okay. The setup was pretty much what you would expect. I didn't have much expectations anyway, so like I'm not expecting, you know, miracle writing or anything to make Mai suddenly the super interesting, deep character. But, you know, it was decent. It did its job, except for the end part with Juri. I thought that was a complete miss. Her World Tour stuff, again, it was enjoyable, but it was just like Terry, just a theme park, but, you know, more my focus this time. I didn't stream Mai because, to be honest, when I streamed Terry and after I'd finished the Terry stream, I don't think I mentioned this on stream, but after I finished that stream, I kind of sat there for a minute and I was kind of like, all I really did for that stream was just do the stuff with Terry and go like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's a sick reference. Oh, that's cool. And it's like, I'm a fan of Terry. I like Terry a lot as a character, and that was all I really did. I'm not the biggest fan of Mai, in all honesty. She's not a bad character or anything. I just never really gravitated towards her. She's just never been a character that's kind of like gone, oh, like I love Mai, Mai's sick, whatever. She's definitely a cool character. I definitely get the appeal, but like I just never really cared that much about her. So in that sense, I thought, you know, I'm gonna have even less to say about Mai streaming, because it's like, oh, that's cool, don't really care, but whatever. So I didn't bother streaming Mai because I think overall, as much as I didn't like Bison being in the game, I think Mai was the character I was the least interested in, or the least happy was in the season. Nothing against Mai, but yeah, her being in the game kind of did rub me the wrong way a bit, but I'll kind of cover that in a minute. But yeah, that's all I can really say. Again, I know I said it 100 times when I was talking about Terry just now, but yeah, there's just nothing really for me to say about Mai's like arcade and World Tour stuff. It was about what I expected. It just, you know, it definitely gave a good insight into the character for people who didn't know her, for people who weren't familiar with her, for people who had never really played KOF or Fatal Fury and stuff like that. Yeah, it was about what I expected, and I think Mai like turned out well. Like, I think she's a cool character. I think her inclusion is fun. But, you know, like I said with Terry, like, did we really need Terry, like a guest character like that in year 2 when so many characters are gone? No, we didn't. And I feel that even more with Mai, because, you know, she was just never a character at any point prior to her being announced for year 2 where I was like, you know what this game really needs? Mai Shiranui. There was never a point like that. You know, that doesn't mean to say her inclusion is unwarranted or, you know, isn't welcome. It's fun, it's cool. My biggest umbrage I take with it is just both Mai and Terry being in this year was just too much. And that's probably going to be like the biggest talking point I'm going to have with Mai, because again, I like Terry more, so I'm more inclined to have rather had Terry just in this year. But you can take either or. Like, you know, you could have cut Mai out or you could have cut Terry out and just had the one in. I definitely think they should have just had the one. If it was up to me, I would have just had Terry in this year, and then in year 3, I would have done Mai. So, you know, it's not just like half the year or half the characters in the year that we're getting are just from like a different game. Because if you really think about it, Bison came out at the end of June, I think June 26th, and then Elena came out on June 5th. That's almost a year with no Street Fighter characters. Like, we didn't get any Street Fighter content for almost a solid year of this game. And that's crazy. And, you know, Terry and Mai were fun. I enjoyed them in the game. Like, I'm not against them. It's cool that they're here. I will enjoy them in the future as more Street Fighter characters get added. But at this point in the game, year 2, 1 Street Fighter 3 character, no Street Fighter Alpha characters, 1 Street Fighter 4 character, 2 Street Fighter 5 characters, about 200 fucking Street Fighter 2 characters. Having 2 SNK characters take up half the year was just ridiculous. And that, more than anything, was my biggest issue with this year and this lineup in particular. I have my issues with Bison. You've just listened to it. If you've been watching the whole video up to this point, you know why I don't like Bison being in the game this soon. That is just one thing, because at least Bison's a Street Fighter character. I can, you know, that's whatever. These two being in the game and taking up half the year, that was too much. And I genuinely, with my heart and soul, hope that Capcom never do this again. Because if you're going to have 4 characters a year, whatever, that's just what it is. I've accepted it now. But if you're gonna have 4 characters, don't make it so half of them aren't even from Street Fighter. Because think of how many characters we still don't have in this game yet. Sakura, Makoto, Dudley, Alex, Karine, Manat, Zeku. You know, I could go on, I could name about 100 characters that should be in this game at this point, or could be in this game at this point. And again, this is a wider argument about guest characters. I don't hate guest characters inherently. I think they can be cool if done right. I think Terry and Mai are really good examples of guest characters done right. Ronaldo and the DJ from City of the Wolves can go fuck themselves. That's ridiculous. You know, there's a fine line. But, you know, even if you have a guest character that's done right, there is still that feeling that comes with them that they're taking a slot from somebody else. And I don't think Terry or Mai individually are taking a slot from somebody else, but together in the same season, back to back, no, like they absolutely took a slot from somebody else. One of those characters could have been pushed aside and we could have had somebody else. Imagine if this season was like Bison, Terry, Sakura and Elena. That would have been great. I mean, it's still 4 characters a year, which isn't great, but I mean, I think having Sakura in there, I think would have had a really big boost of positivity. Because, to be honest, I said this about year 1, not a lot of people really liked the character picks of year 1. Individually they were fine, but together they just weren't that great. And I think it's a similar thing here, where it's like individually these characters are cool, but together it's just not great. And I really think we could have used a character like Sakura, like a big one, or even like Makoto, as a big kind of like, boom, here's a really popular character in the game, kind of lift spirits a bit, and maybe even make the 4 character season just not feel as bad, because at least you're getting a really big character in Sakura or Sagat or somebody like that. But they didn't do that. And I know now, we get it. They're doing it because City of the Wolves are also getting 2 characters in Ken and Chun-Li. And to be honest, I would do the same with City of the Wolves. I would push one of Ken or Chun-Li to season 2. I would probably put Ken to season 2 because, you know, I think the game in general needs more female characters. You know, I would have put like Kim Jae-hoon instead of Ken and get, you know, fill that up and then move Ken, so it's not just like, you know. But, you know, City of the Wolves isn't bad because at least we're getting 5 characters. If City of the Wolves first season was just Andy, Ken, Chun-Li and Joe, that would have been terrible. Like, at least Mr. Big is there to kind of, you know, spice the season pass up a bit, you know. And again, Elena is spicing up the season pass a bit, but it's still the fact that like half of this content of this year is just nothing to do with Street Fighter, and that sucks. Yeah, I just really think, again, I'm not blaming Mai, I'm not blaming Terry, I'm blaming the choice to put the both of them in the same season back to back. I think that was a really poor choice from Capcom. I think they absolutely should have, at the very least, done maybe Bison, Terry, Elena, Mai, and done Mai last, or, you know, better yet, just move Mai to year 3 and move a character from year 3 from Street Fighter into this pass, whether it's, you know, Alex or Sakura or whoever. And yeah, like I said, I just hope, you know, Capcom never do this again. If they're gonna have a guest character, spread them out. Don't do this back-to-back stuff, you know. Don't have half the year be, you know, filled up with non-Street Fighter stuff. Like, this is a Street Fighter game at the end of the day. People are coming here to play Street Fighter, to play as Street Fighter characters. Having a guest like Terry and Mai is cool, but you need to have a balance to this stuff, and they completely unbalanced it. I know technically it's balanced, but yeah, just the way they did it and how long these seasons take. There was just a very large middle portion of this year where like I just didn't really care. Like, I came on, I played them, I recorded footage for them, I streamed them, and then it was like, well, okay, I'm just gonna go then, because, you know, it's a new character, but it's not a Street Fighter character. You know, there's no investment for me here. It's like, okay, yeah, cool, Terry and Mai are in the game, and that's fun and that's exciting, but, you know, we're not getting anything. Like, we've not had anything like like really story-wise for Street Fighter 6 in almost a year, like until Elena comes out. Yeah, so this was definitely like the down point of the year for me. Nothing against Mai, she was okay. I think she was fun, not a character, you know, I'm still not sold on Mai. It didn't make me a big Mai fan, didn't make me a Mai player. I didn't expect it to, but I think all things considered, yeah, they did a good job again. It was, again, it's just very similar to Terry, and that's all I can really say. Mai was cool, but I just really hate that, you know, so much of this last year for Street Fighter 6 was taken up by these two. It really, really sucks. So what was June 5th, 2025, that soon became June 4th, 2025, we got Elena in Street Fighter 6. And guys, it finally happened. We finally got a Street Fighter 3 character in this game set after Street Fighter 3. By the way, if my voice sounds rough or hoarse or anything like that, I literally just finished the Elena stream like a few minutes ago. I'm trying to get this video out quick for tomorrow before Summer Games Fest on Friday. So you'll have to forgive me if this sounds a bit different or rough or anything like that. So yeah, Elena is finally in this game. It's been a long time coming, obviously. I mean, year 2 was revealed roughly about a year ago now. So Elena has pretty much been that kind of like one real glimmer of hope for me in terms of like, you know, that destination at the end of the road. Like, I get through this year, I get through Bison, I get through the double SNK guests, and finally my reward for putting up with all this stuff is Elena, a character I really like a lot. It's really nice to see her. I'm really glad she's in the game. Would she have been my first Street Fighter 3 character that I would have wanted in this game? No, she probably would have been up there, but there was definitely a lot of other characters I would have liked first. You know, Sean, Alex, stuff like that. But, you know, I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to moan about it. I'm just glad we finally have a Street Fighter 3 character in this game. The fact it's taken over 2 years to get one is a joke, in all honesty. I'm not going to go too much into it because, you know, God knows I've talked about it to death in other videos and probably even in this one earlier. But, you know, it's just silly that it's taken this long to get one. But, you know, with that out of the way, it's just time to just enjoy the character themselves. And yeah, Elena is awesome. She's really good. To no one's surprise, I imagine, she's by far, you know, the standout character for me this year, and honestly probably one of my favorite like characters just in the game, full stop. She's really fun to play. I don't think I'll end up maining her, especially as more characters get added, you know, in future seasons. But, you know, she's definitely going to be a character I'll come back to often. So we'll start with the arcade stuff, and my only real issue with it isn't even really the game's fault. It's not Elena's fault. It's not the writing's fault. It's my own expectations. You know, I kind of thought the way that they were setting up this season in terms of the formation and the order of the characters. One of the things that I remember Takayuki Nakayama and Shuhei Matsumoto talking about with Bison is that he was sort of like the finale of like the main first arc of the game, like, you know, the base roster year 1, and then Bison was the end of that as the first character of year 2, that kind of build up to his return. And I thought, you know, that made sense given, you know, the way the story went throughout year 1 and all that. So that was fine. And then you get to, you know, the kind of double SNK character drops, and I thought that was serving as a sort of interlude of sorts, like a kind of break from the main story. And I kind of just expected that Elena's story stuff would kind of be the beginning of a new arc. I thought, given there was a lot of focus on the moon and, you know, her already pre-established links with, you know, her connections with the Earth and stuff like that, I thought maybe we were going to be getting like a G kind of setup here, because that's still like a major storyline from 5 that's just at the moment being completely dropped. But we really didn't get that at all. In terms of Elena's role in the game, she doesn't really have one. She's just one of those characters like Honda and Blanca that's just there, and that's not a bad thing. You know, not every character has to be, you know, deeply tied to the plot. I mean, in Street Fighter 3, Elena wasn't tied to the plot, which in all honesty is kind of why I think they chose her as like the first Street Fighter 3 character, because, you know, you can bring Elena back and get that buzz of a Street Fighter 3 character being back, but she's got nothing to do with Gil or the Secret Society, so you don't really have to bring that plot back, you know, straight away. So in that sense, it makes sense that, you know, she's just still kind of removed from anything plot-wise, like majorly plot-wise, I mean. But that said, I think her story stuff was fun. You know, I thought it was a really good showcase of the character, a really good showing of how fun and just charming and nice and bubbly of a character Elena is. I think they did a really good job with that. Her conversations with Ryu and Akuma were really fun, really interesting. I was actually laughing quite a lot when she was talking to Ryu about, hey, you know, you and Akuma can be best friends, you know, like, you guys are really like, and Ryu was like, what? What? You're crazy. It was really, really fun stuff. And there's the thing with Akuma as well, where his conversation with Elena at the start of it was honestly like probably the most interesting he's been in this game. Like more interesting by far than like Akuma's own story stuff, which I remember at the time, I think I said last year, like I was really disappointed with because it was just a lot of the same, like just more of the same with Akuma, just I'm gruff, angry, you know, killing fighting man. But it was actually nice to see him like chilled and like talking and having a normal conversation with somebody. It was really nice. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed the like fully voiced cameo of Narumi, who was Elena's best friend from Street Fighter 3. That was really cool. I really wasn't expecting that. Her being in the arcade was spoiled for me, but I didn't know she was voiced or anything like that. I just saw a shot of Narumi with Elena and Ryu as a thumbnail for someone's video. So I think that was really cool. It was really nice. I was expecting like a little bit of Narumi maybe to be in, you know, this artwork here, maybe a mention here, but like she was featured really heavily, which is awesome. I love that. I really do. I'm glad they took the time to like actually go like, no, like Narumi is a really important character to Elena, because she is. And, you know, I really appreciate that. And it also gives me a bit of hope for future Street Fighter characters. Like, if Shawn ever gets added, like, I kind of hope we get to see his whole family, you know. His brother Fabio, like, maybe something with Laura, his dad, his mother, his grandfather, his two cousins. It'd be really cool if we got stuff like that. Them showing up as NPCs for side quests, them showing up in artwork and stuff like that. It'd be really cool. So, you know, it's a good precedent, and I hope they continue it. Because one thing I've kind of always been baffled about with this game is just a severe lack of cameos, and not so much from NPCs, but like former like playable characters. Like it seems like Capcom are just really reluctant to use cameos and like use past characters from other Street Fighter games. It's kind of like, hey, here's this character that's really closely linked to this other character that's playable and in the game. Let's kind of have them show up and help boost the story. I think Elena and Narumi are one of the very few examples in this game. It's kind of a shame. Her World Tour stuff was definitely the highlight for me, though. I really liked her World Tour stuff, especially the conversations you have with her during her bond and the artwork for that. I think some highlights for me were definitely, you know, a bit of a deep dive into her healing powers and where they come from. The reveal that, you know, it's an ancestral thing, it doesn't affect everybody, because it was never really established or really talked about much in Street Fighter 3, like where does the healing power come from, because we've never seen a character before or since Elena that does stuff like that. Not even her own family have been shown to use the healing power. And the fact that they actually took the time to go, hey, you know, it's an ancestral thing that's part of her tribe and her ancestry, and every now and then it just skips several generations and Elena is the current person, you know, in that ancestry to be able to use it. I think it's really cool. I also think it opens up a few possibilities that they can take Elena in at this point in the storyline. I don't think it would take much effort at all to just kind of go, this healing power is actually linked to the secret society and is even possibly, you know, one of the 66 secret arts. I don't think they'll do it 100%. I don't expect them to do that at all, but they could, and I think that's an interesting possibility, and that's kind of all I really want. I just want possibilities, interesting things, even if they're not done anything with, you know, just the possibility of having something interesting there I think is enough for me, especially at the moment. I'll honestly just kind of take any crumb I can get at this point. Another big highlight for me was getting a bit of a deep dive into Elena and Narumi's other friends who cameo in Elena's endings in New Generation and Second Impact. Really cool. Two very overlooked characters. I think they don't even have, you know, canon names, I don't think. So I was not expecting them at all to be featured in anything in this game, but they did appear in one of the artworks, which I think was really nice. That definitely put a big smile on my face when I saw that. It was really nice that I go, hey, you know, these two very minor characters, they appear in one ending in, you know, 1/2 Street Fighter games. You know, that's really sick that they actually took the time to go back and age them up and also give them, you know, a bit more depth in the sense of like Elena and Narumi, they still hang out with these two. They don't see them all the time because they've graduated school now and they've moved on. They're in universities, they've worked jobs now and stuff like that. Life goes on, and you know, but they still take the time every now and then to meet up and hang out, and I think that's really nice. And you know, just having that little bit of time to go, hey, these two characters, they still exist, they still hang out with Elena, they're all still friends. No, it's really appreciated that. It was really nice to see. I think the only other thing I can think of for now with the Elena update is that I think it's a bit of a shame that I kind of feel like they've already wasted the like One Fateful Day thing that came with Terry. Because when I was talking about Terry, I was saying like, oh, you know, this new thing that I've added to kind of like help separate World Tour from the rest of the game, you know, that you can now go, hey, this part of World Tour, it comes with the base game. And then once that gets too full of characters and the story gets muddled, you can go, okay, here's a blank new sheet that you can write on and move stuff around. And I really thought, you know, we were going to eventually get that. Maybe not with Elena, but, you know, maybe in a future season we were going to get that kind of like big World Tour expansion. So the fact that, all of Elena's stuff was also done in like a One Fateful Day thing was disappointing to me because having gone through it, I don't really know why exactly it had to be done. I know the main reason is because, she has interactions with DJ and Manon that, could mess with things if you haven't done those characters yet, if you haven't done them as masters yet. I mean, they did kind of have it so that you had to do Manon's mastery before you could do Elena's. I don't know why they didn't do the same with DJ. Maybe they just didn't want people to have to, do two masters to get to Elena. I don't know. It was still weird. It was just weird to me, to be honest. Even knowing now and having played it, I don't think they really needed to do it. Like, have her in her own, like, One Fateful Day thing. It's whatever, though. It's not a big deal. But I kind of wonder now, is, like, not every character, but are most characters from this point on that get added just going to get thrown into like the One Fateful Day section, and now you're just going to have like a bunch of different like subsections of World Tour with like this thing here, and you got to scroll all the way down. It's like, oh, Alex has been added, in 2 seasons from now or something, and I've got to scroll down like 5 tabs on the World Tour like menu select thing to find his One Fateful Day thing that takes me, it's just weird. I think that's going to make it even more cluttered than it already is, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm a bit feeling like they've kind of already messed that up. I don't know. It's way too early to say, I know, but that's kind of the feeling I get. Is like it's probably not going to work exactly how I think it should, which is disappointing. But like I said, I can't really judge it too much yet. Overall, yeah, I think, like I said earlier, she is by far like one of the best, if not the best additions they've added to the game since it came out. Really, really cool character. Really like well done. They have kind of continued her personality and stuff like that pretty much like perfectly from 3, which is good. I love that. I want more of that. I'm not one of those people where it's like, they didn't do it exactly 1-to-1. Like, no, like I want her to grow. I want all the Street Fighter 3 characters to come back because I want to see how these characters have grown, because we've only ever seen them younger. We've never seen them move forward, and Elena is the first one we've seen move forward, and it's great. And now that I've had that taste, it's like I want more of it. So yeah, I want more. I want Sean, I want Makoto, Alex, Necro, Remy. I want all of them, Ibuki, whatever. I want all of them. I want to see all of these characters grow and to see how they've changed. And just based off how they've done Elena, I think they've done a great job so far. I'm, very interested. I'm very optimistic about them, doing well with other characters in the future. So that's great. And, that's probably the highest praise I can give at this point, especially for this character and for where things are in the game, It's great, we've got all the Street Fighter 2 characters, not all of them, but I mean basically all of them. But we've got all these Street Fighter 2 characters, and yay, familiarity, these characters are back again. But a lot of them are just kind of rotating the same storylines, or, different versions, it's the same storylines with a different coat of paint and stuff like that. And it's a bit like, okay, whatever. And then, we finally get a character that actually, is the same, but they've grown. We've seen them mature. They're in a different place in life, but they're still that same character. They've just grown. And it's really nice to see, and I really like it. And, it was definitely a highlight for me. And it was definitely, there wasn't any earth-shattering reveals or big story revelations. It was just a fun time. It was a fun way to explore a character, see more of them, see more of their relationships with their family, see more relationships with their friends, more backstory into who they are, their ancestry, stuff like that, more details on Elena's tribe, where, her heritage, stuff like that. Just awesome stuff in general. Like, I want more of it. I definitely, want them to keep going with it. I want them to keep expanding on these characters. I want them to, keep using these Street Fighter 3 characters, keep them, coming in, developing them, showing more of their backstory, showing more of their relationships with the people in their lives, stuff like that, because God help me, if we go back to like, year 3, we get Vega and Balrog, and it's just, let's go build Shadaloo together with Bison. It's like, God, fuck, I hope it's not that. I hope this is a sign that they're actually, moving forward now. They've got all the old favourites in. They've got Bison back. He's doing Shadaloo stuff again. Awesome. Great for you guys. I'm glad you're happy doing the same shit again for like the 3rd game in a row. But you've done it now. You got it out of your system. Let's move forward. Let's bring in more characters like Elena. Because it is genuinely no surprise to me that like one of the freshest, most exciting, most charming, most just like breath of fresh air characters in this game is the first one from Street Fighter 3. Like, it's almost like there's a reason I've been campaigning for these characters to come back in this game, because they're an untapped potential of just gold. You know, there's so much awesome stuff they can do with these characters. And now that we've got Elena and we can go, oh no, this dev team can actually do sick things with these characters, I don't want them to stop, and I hope they don't stop. You know, I want a Street Fighter 3 character in every season going forward. I'm fully aware I probably won't get that, but you know, a guy can dream. It will probably bite me in the ass, but we'll get there when we get there, I guess. But yeah, absolutely fantastic job. Really happy with Elena. By far the best character this year. I'd honestly go as far as to say she's probably the best character in the game so far in terms of just presentation and stuff like that, and just how they handled her and how much energy and just positivity she exudes. It's how Elena should be, and you know, they did a great job with her, and you know, that's all I can ask for. Just if you're going to bring these characters back finally, just do a good job with them, and they did. And you know, I can't see anything more than that. So I shall finish this video with just some closing thoughts as we get to the conclusion of my recap of year 2 of Street Fighter 6. And I think first off, it's just to talk again about the content pipeline. I think I mentioned this quite a bit in the previous video, but yeah, we're kind of in an even worse spot this year, because we didn't even get any like outfit 4s, you know, for the rest of the roster. And like, I don't know, something feels broken along the way. I really don't know what's going on at Capcom. Like, obviously, costumes aren't the make or break of this game. Like, the core game, the characters, stuff like that, the gameplay is still very solid, it's still very fun, and, you know, I have no problem with that. But just the amount of content that this game should be having versus what it's getting feels very lopsided, and I don't really know what the solution is. They have talked about some things on Twitter, like, oh, you know, we're going to be changing things, you know, in future seasons. We're going to be making the battle passes a bit more worth it, you know, not just so lopsided in terms of avatar content. And that's great, but you know, we can't really judge it fully until we see what those changes are and how they work and stuff like that. So you know, that's all I can really say about that. But I do feel like something is going on. There is an issue somewhere, because we still have just a continued abundance of avatar cosmetics. Again, not the worst thing in the world, but when that's all you're offering, like month after month, battle pass after battle pass, it just gets to a point where it's like, clearly you're only making this stuff A, because it sells, and it does sell, but like it just kind of says that like this is all the stuff we're making for now because it's just cheaper to make. It doesn't take as much time and effort as something that you can make, you know, for a main roster character. It's just a shame. And I think a lot of, you know, just the content in general and the offerings, I think so much of it, I think just could be better. Giant Attack is such a weird thing at this point, because you know, we had the first Giant Attack with Akuma, and it was really cool and interesting and a good way to shake up, you know, the game for a bit, the battle hub for a bit with the new stuff going on. And then we had another Giant Attack with Bison like a couple weeks later, and that was another thing that was really cool and had a lot of stuff going on. And then we've just had nothing since. Like, there's been no Giant Attack for almost a year now, and I'm sure the first character of season 3 will also have a Giant Attack. But you know, waiting a year for it, why did we have other characters, you know, as Giant Attacks? Does it have to be villains? Does it have to be, you know, past villains in past games? Again, just this feeling of being stuck in the past. Like, we can do these things like Giant Attack for characters that aren't just villains from Street Fighter 2, you know? Why couldn't Aki be a Giant Attack? Who's to say Ryu couldn't be a Giant Attack? It's so silly, you know, it doesn't have to have a lore story reason. It doesn't need to be a thing that's just exclusive to past villains either, you know. Why couldn't Terry have his own Giant Attack? Why didn't every character this year come with a Giant Attack? Stuff like that. It's just, why? There's no need for it. There's no reason for it. I don't see why we had to have 2 Giant Attacks really close to each other and then just nothing for a year. It's so silly to me. But sadly, it all just connects together into just the overall theme of this year. And I said last year, and I think I was just being over dramatic, but I said, is, you know, Street Fighter 6 a game of broken promises? No, it's not. Because they never really promised anything. They never said, hey, we're going to be doing this amount of content this amount of times a year. They never said that they were going to be doing new outfits for all the characters every year. That was assumptions on our part, and I think that is the overall theme of year 1. Like, year 1's theme was that it was a year of assumptions. It was us assuming, is this going to be how the game is? It should be like this. Why isn't it like this? I assumed it was going to be like this. Why aren't we getting these costumes this often? And, you know, that was the growing pains of year 1. It was us kind of going, what's going on here? Is this how it's always going to be? And yeah, year 2 is the year of acceptance. It's basically us having to go, this is how the game is now. This game is quality over quantity, and it's hard. It's hard to accept that after coming from Street Fighter 5, which was the opposite. It was, you know, quantity over quality. You got a lot more content in Street Fighter 5. You got a lot more stages. You got a lot more costumes, but the quality was not even a fraction of the quality of Street Fighter 6. And it's one of those things where, you know, your mileage may vary. What you prefer, what you want from a game, especially a fighting game like this. Which one you favour, Street Fighter 5 or Street Fighter 6, depends on which one you want more. Do you want more quality over quantity? Then you're going to like Street Fighter 6 more. Do you want more quantity over quality? Then you'll probably end up liking Street Fighter 5 more. It's just how it is, and that is the big thing for me this year, is accepting that this is the game. This is how the game is going to work. It's going to be 4 characters a year. It's going to be avatar gear almost every month. It's going to be very little chance of costumes happening. They've already confirmed that they're doing outfit 4s, which is awesome, great, but you know, again, the assumption was that they were going to be doing them every year in the middle of the season, and that's not the case, and we have to accept that. And that's what I'm kind of getting at. So a lot of it is going, no, this is just how things are. And the disappointment and the frustration, it sucks. I desperately want more than 4 characters a year in this game, but it's not going to happen, and it's time to accept that. And I think it's time to go into year 3 going, you know what? This is the game. And yeah, I think more than anything, I just want to go into year 3 with some optimism. You know, I think at this point for me personally, there's not really much worse we can get, obviously touch wood. But when I realistically think about it, I mean, all the characters that I didn't want in this game, in all honesty, almost all of them are already in the game. You know, I didn't want characters like Dulcim or Honda. I think they easily could have skipped this game, but it is what it is. Bison, like I said at the start of the video, easily could have skipped this game or could have been one of the last characters added, but he's already in the game. So those band-aids have already been ripped off for me. Obviously there's other characters I don't want, like I don't want to see Abigail. He's probably the character at this point and I'm most like, just please no. If they add him, I'm not going to be too upset, because I think he'll just by default be way better than he was in Street Fighter 5, but he's still not a character I'm really desperate to see back. But honestly, we're at a point where it's like, even other Street Fighter 2 characters, like, I'm fine with seeing Vega, I'm fine with seeing Balrog. Fei Long is a character I actually genuinely want. I don't think we'll see T-Hawk, which is fine by me. But like, even those characters, you know, if they were to come back, I'd be like, yeah, cool, see, you know, just see what you can do with them. If you can make them interesting and make me like them, then great. You know, characters I do want, there's no guarantee they make it. You know, we could get Alex next year, we could get Sean next year. You know, there's the possibilities are endless, so to speak. And yeah, I'll just have to see how it goes. There is also the elephant in the room that I haven't really talked about on this channel, because I don't really want to talk about something that isn't like a guarantee or something like that. There's no real like concrete proof, it's just a lot of people saying it. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. But there is a big rumour that's been going around for pretty much about a year now, since year 2 got confirmed, and a lot of people kind of looked back at previous rumours and leaks. And 4 characters have been thrown around for quite a while now as a possible year 3 lineup, which was Sagat, Alex, Sea Viper, and depending on who you know, the source you get it from, one person said it was a new character, the other person said it was Ingrid. And personally, that's about as close to a perfect lineup as I can think. Ingrid is not a character I've ever really liked or paid much attention to, but I'm totally open to them doing something interesting or new with her. I'm not against that at all. Obviously, Alex is like my favourite fighting game character of all time, so I'm overjoyed at that. Sagat is a really solid character, can't hate that choice at all. I also really like Sagat in general, so that's cool. Viper is a really cool pick. She should have been in Street Fighter 5, but I'll happily take her in Street Fighter 6. So yeah, like, I would be overjoyed if that was the lineup. We'll see how it goes though. Hopefully at the time that this video is being uploaded, because I'm trying to get it out before Summer Games Fest. But Summer Games Fest is on Friday, June 6th, so I will be live streaming that. You can see it on the channel now if you're watching this video as it comes out. If not, you can go back and watch the VOD if you're watching this from the future, and you can see me, you know, leap for joy or cry miserably, or just be miffed we didn't get a reveal if there is no reveal. But the chances are we are going to get, you know, year 3 shown off and announced at Summer Games Fest tomorrow. So, you know, fingers crossed it's the lineup that was rumoured, because I would be overjoyed with that lineup. But, you know, that's year 2. Year 2 is done. There's nothing else I can really say. I've waffled on for far longer than I thought, far longer than I did for Street Fighter 6 year 1. So yeah, that's all I can really say at this point. Like I said, hopefully we get year 3 announced at Summer Games Fest on Friday, June 6th. So yeah, that's all I can really say. Thank you all for watching so much, and I shall see you all in the next one. Thank you and goodbye.
We await your return, warrior.